Hey everybody. One more time, hey everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Tyler Bielman. I'm a game designer. I work at a studio in Vancouver for Microsoft. I previously spent a lot of time at a company called Wizards of the Coast, where I met.
He didn't work there. He just spent a lot of time.
I knew that. Where I met these fine gentlemen, as well as a lot of fine people in the audience as well.
Like you need to advertise. You could have just gone on Facebook and pulled all our friends because they're here. So.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So, like a lot of Wizards alumni, we've gone out from the analog realm of the tabletop into the digital realm and made that transition. And what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit about game design, and specifically to talk about the differences and similarities and trends around three different categories: casual games, social games, and MMOs. This talk will probably be a little bit technical about game design issues. So if you're here because you're interested in game design, or you're here because you're a fan of those kinds of games and you want to know how they work or how they get made, that's great. But if it gets a little bit fidgety as we sort of pop open the hood and work on the engine, I apologize in advance. We'll try not to bore you too much. But these gentlemen won't bore you at all. To my immediate right is Mr. Paul Peterson. Paul Peterson, tell a bit about yourself.
I used to work at Wizards of the Coast as a game designer. I made Guillotine. Thank you. And then I moved into the digital realm. I made an MMO called Horizons. And then now I currently work at, then I started Hidden City Games, where we made Clout and Balisera. And then now I work for Real Networks making casual and social games.
And to his immediate right, we have Mr. Henry Stern.
Hi. Hello. I also worked with Wizards for many years, mostly working on Magic as one of their, we call them developers, but really they're designers at Magic. I also worked on board games there. I made a little board game called Vegas Showdown, which people like. Thank you, Paul. I worked on some other sort of new business, Pokemon and Maple Story type games. Left Wizards a little over a year ago, and I'm now working at Zynga, making games like Mafia Wars and Farmville.
And last but not least, to his immediate right, prolific designer, my personal good friend, Mr. James Earnest.
Hi.
Now, for those of you looking at your programs, this was supposed to be a man named Chuck O'Shea, but we threw him over for Mr. James Earnest, because James is vastly more than
Well, I am also an alumnus of Wizards of the Coast. I worked there for a while before I had a career. After that, I owned a company called Cheap Ass Games, which made, let me just go down the list.
It's only an hour.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be here for an hour. And then after that, I went to work for Microsoft. I worked in Carbonated games at Microsoft and did a few of the projects there for a couple years, mostly casual games. We did the Fable 2 pub games on the Xbox, among other more successful and popular titles. And right now I work for the Amazing Society, who's doing the Marvel Superhero Squad online game. That's the booster packs and trading cards you got in your show bags.
which is an online TCG embedded within an MMO, yeah?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, it is. It is what you said it is.
Okay, so the three categories we wanted to talk about were casual games, social games, and MMOs. So we're going to start out by defining kind of what each of those means, so that when we talk about how they're blending and blurring, we'll have some context. So let's talk first about casual games, because they sort of came first in terms of the game renaissance and sort of changed who the PC gamer was. Paul, can you talk about that?
Yeah, casual games basically, it's such a broad category, but they're games that have fairly simple mechanics that you can, make a bunch of games on basically. The things like hidden object games are big, match 3 games like Bejeweled and every other game that's anything like Bejeweled, and time management games. Diner Dash was the first big one, but now there's this huge category. Those are the kind of games, but also pretty much anything you'd find in PopCap, Pogo, Big Fish Games, Gatehouse. Those are all the casual games.
And they're primarily, you download a trial game.
Yep.
For free, you play it for 60 minutes, then they ask you for $15
Yep.
to unlock the full game.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. So casual games came along, and lots of unorthodox gaming demographics came with it. Females in their 40s being kind of this amazing explosion. Now, it's not what I. Yeah. Then Facebook comes along. Facebook becomes a gaming platform, and you see a lot of Facebook games pop up. And the dominant Facebook gaming company is Zynga. That has Farmville and has Mafia Wars, and so Henry Stern's going to talk just briefly about Facebook games.
I was going to just talk about social games.
Social games, sorry, not Facebook games, social games.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
The interesting thing is like games, like going back, before the whole digital world, like all games were inherently social. Like you basically couldn't do much of a game by yourself. Like you say, crossword puzzles and such. But if you want to play a game, you're playing cards, you're playing board games, you'd be playing with your friends. Sometime in the digital era, a lot of the games on the computer became sort of just solo experiences that you're playing. A lot of those were tons of fun, like the really early RPGs, the Zorks, and the such on the computer were tons of fun. Eventually, those got to a place where you could start playing with your friends again as MMOs, well, MUDs that preceded them, then it became MMOs. You're still playing with people. A lot of times you were with your friends or not your friends. People became your friends through MMOs, which would be awesome. And now on Facebook, actually MySpace was like the big gaming platform before Facebook took them, was a thing that you would actually have your friends identified and the games would be played with your friends, and your friends could help you and you could ask for help from your friends as you're playing games.
And the way that those games make money is different than casual games because how do those games make their dollars?
Well, it depends. Primarily, the games are free so that they can get much wider distribution, and then within the game, you can buy small items that give you either like a decoration or an advantage to play in the game. So it's through microtransactions.
Right. And then the last category we want to talk about is sort of the more classic or traditional MMO, which is a standalone application that you go into and your friends play too, sort of World of Warcraft. James, you want to talk about sort of where MMOs stand today?
No.
Okay.
No, so MMO is actually short for MMORPG usually, and it stands for massively multiplayer online. They're not all RPGs, and in fact, like the one that my company is working on now, the Marvel game, is not an RPG in the traditional sense that you have a single character that you level up. But it is massively multiplayer because it supports a lot of players online. The state of that business now is just, I think, growing and exploring and continuing to try to redefine that designation.
And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about. So, and then a lot of MMOs, or at least early MMOs, were subscription-based. You would pay an ongoing monthly fee to have your character persist in that world, World of Warcraft being sort of the dominator in that category. So 3 different monetization strategies, 3 different sort of levels of mechanics that go with them. So when I was thinking about a topic for PAX, it occurred to me that there's a lot of blending that's happening in these environments and in the platforms themselves are changing. So I wanted to get people up here who really understood it, help define and maybe predict where these game categories are going.
So I remember when MMOs were brand new, they felt like the best way to socialize online. They felt like it. They really weren't, but they felt like it. Because Paul is my victim of this story, right? We're working at Wizards. He says, come look at this game. It's a massively multiplayer online game. It's called, what was that thing called? EverQuest. And watch me play EverQuest. Because millions of people all over the world are playing in the same room. I thought, oh, that's great. So I watched him play, and he sat still, and he waited for a lizard man to spawn and killed him over and over and over again. And I said, how is this good? And he says, you see that guy? He's in Germany. So at the beginning, it was more just it was a feeling. Seriously, it was more of a feeling that everyone was playing in the same room, even if it always wasn't true. And of course, he got in guilds and got in raids and did things with big groups, but it wasn't always like that. More, it was just like, I'm pretending I'm here with my friends instead of all by myself.
Well,
just a second. The more important thing wasn't that guy was in Germany. It was like the guy next to me was actually at home that day, playing on his home PC, and I was playing. We were playing together.
Well, so
I didn't see you interact with him. I mean, that's why the story is funny to me.
Yours was funnier. That's given.
The truth's out the window.
But you bring up an interesting point, which is that you were witnessing a multiplayer experience where the players weren't really interacting. Now let's talk a little bit about social games, and particularly something like Farmville, where I think...
For the players. Definitely don't interact.
So that,
Tyler just made a move on your farm yesterday. Do you accept? No. I guess that's interacting.
that's what I'm getting at. Social games are generally asynchronous, which sort of in the parlance means I make a move and then at some point you make a move. And that harkens back to, play chess by mail from way back in the day. But people, I believe, who play these social games think that they're playing with their friends, but in reality there's not a lot of interaction happening in real time.
So the illusion is more important than the fact. And of course they are interacting, they are sending each other stuff that they desperately need themselves. And that's how the games grow, by sort of requiring you to interact virally with people who don't even want to play it. Right? Who hasn't been spammed by Farmville messages? Well, but the feeling of playing with your friends is never always exactly the same as actually playing with your friends.
So Henry, you're the design director of Mafia Wars, yeah?
Yep.
And I think Mafia Wars is credited by and large as being one of the first games where the number of people you recruited was a game variable that could be very powerful and important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the actual mechanics of the game was to get more people in Mafia because you would be more powerful if you had more people in Mafia. I mean, that's a blending of mechanics and morality, trying to get more people to join your Mafia. An interesting take on that is very early on, it was gated such that you couldn't even progress in the game unless you got more people. Like the missions, like the 5th mission you do, you had to have 2 people, and then the 10th mission you had to have now 5 people in your Mafia, and then a later mission you had to have 20 people, etc. And we had a lot of people who complained about this because they didn't want to have to bother their friends and stuff. And we noticed when we took that requirement out of the game, and it's not in the game now if anyone's played recently, that our rate of increase grew. That our growth ramped up when we took away those barriers. So it's a fine line that you want to have between requiring friends and making it more powerful if you have more people, but you don't want to have sort of like this ceiling that people feel like, now I need to go find some friends that play this game and go to some thread and find some people and add them as friends.
So when I look at sort of the evolution of games online, achievements, Xbox Live puts out this achievement system that creates a meta game for your operating system around the games that you play, and then you see achievements sort of spiral out to a lot of different places and a lot of different things. World of Warcraft eventually puts in achievements and things like that. Do you guys feel like the recruiting of other people to play a game is blossoming out into other games that maybe wouldn't have ordinarily had it? Has Mafia Wars changed what a fundamental requirement of an online game is?
Yes.
I think for social networks it's definitely true. I mean, everything on a social network is about morality and getting people, right? I mean, that's when you've got a business model where you're giving your game away for free, and then you're hoping that some percentage of the people down at the bottom of your funnel are going to pay you money for it. You need the top of the funnel to be as big as possible, and that's where morality comes in. It's very powerful.
So World of Warcraft gives you an incentive to Scroll of Resurrection to bring people back into the game. Could you ever envision a time when World of Warcraft would give you a more powerful mount based on the number of people you've recruited into the game? Does that seem like a logical extrapolation of this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they already have programs where if you recruit a friend, you get advantages in the game. They make it so they're encouraging you to recruit people to play.
Right.
I mean, it only makes sense. It's, World of Warcraft is tough that they have, this, you have to make a commitment to pay whatever, it's $50 to buy the box of the software, and then you have to put down your credit card to actually start subscribing, and that's a pretty high barrier to a lot of people. Once you've gotten someone to do that, they're obviously not pretty committed to your product. I really like the system that Turbine has gone to for Lord of the Rings and for their other games, where it's just free to play. Anyone can play. You just download the software and you're good to go. And if you really get into it, you can pay to either rope off content that you can't do unless you're a pair, or other means of making it so that once you become a committed player, you can get into subscription or pay more money.
So let's break down 3 sort of pillars that these products have. The first one let's call engagement. And engagement would be the actual mechanics of the playing. The things you would, if you were playing a single player shooter, it's all engagement. It's just the mechanics of shooting and picking up ammo and leveling up and all that. That's engagement. And then there's virality, this idea that if you invite people to come or you reach out and bring players in, that the game may provide you with incentives, it may not, but at least that's something that's happening in the game. There's a tool for that within the game system or the platform. And then there's the monetization strategy. So if you're a box at retail, you hope somebody pays $60, takes it home and plays it, but you're not really expecting a lot more out of that person unless there's DLC, which kind of falls into a hybrid category. So you have engagement, game design, virality features, and you have the monetization, how you make the money. How do you guys as game designers, how much effort are you putting into each of those three pillars? And what have you seen that sort of has evolved your thinking about how those pillars interact?
Well, like for casual games, the only thing that's important is engagement, because the monetization's all handled already. You're paying $6 for the game, and it's, you know, that number fluctuates occasionally, but it's pretty much been set for a year at a time. And virality, we're starting to really think about. I mean, look, once casual looks at Facebook and we go, look at what's going on there, we're really starting to think like, well, what can we do to leverage that? What can we do to make games that talk back and forth a lot more? And you know, when you start with a box game and you try to make it more social, there's a lot going on there. So for casual, it's just about the engagement more than anything. Make a good game. That's the starting point. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could have the greatest game in the world, but if you can't get people to experience it, it's not going to earn money.
James can tell you about that.
No, for sure. I mean,
Yeah, Vegas Showdown for instance.
yes, thank you. At the end of the day, it really comes down to monetization. You know, at the end of the day, it's like you have so many daily active users playing your game, and they monetize at a particular rate, and that's what's going to pay the bills for the company that you're working for. The key for engagement that you're speaking of, that's to make sure that you're keeping the players that you have, and depending on what sort of network you're on, or depending on how the network you're on changes the rules, engagement can become much more important. Like holding on to the people that you have, keeping them happy with what's going on, has become increasingly important on Facebook.
So just in your average day, just to sort of quantify that somehow, how much of your time are you spending thinking about one of those pillars versus another, or is it all just a blended exercise in your mind?
That's a good question. For me,
Thank you.
as a designer, it's primarily engagement. You know, I'm trying to make sure that the experience people have is the best possible experience they can have playing the game. At the same time, you do need to think about virality, like when you're working on a feature, even if it's an awesome feature, you just need to think about like, how can I make this so that people, not even that they have to like bother their friends about it, but how do I put this? That it like becomes a much more sort of viral feature if like when you put out a request, if you can then surface, hey, these 10 friends actually clicked on this feed. That's something that not a lot of games do. Sort of let you know that it's like, oh, it's awesome that your friends actually like the fact that you sent out a feed, they clicked on it, this is the advantage they got. So sort of surfacing that social behavior makes people then more likely, oh, my friends really like it when I do this, I'll send out these requests to them, or I'll send out this invitations to other people.
Okay. What about you, James, with the game you guys are working on, which has an interesting component also because of the offline TCG side, but how much are you thinking about those buckets?
Well, if you're trying to design a product from scratch, you have to be thinking about all three of those pillars as you go. If you come late to any of those, you're going to make the wrong call. And I think with a kids game, Superhero Squad is primarily for kids, though adults will like it, blah blah blah. But our core audience, right, is the 8 to 10-year-old male fan of Marvel Superhero Squad. He's not on Facebook, or at least he shouldn't be. So we can't really rely so much on that, the virality, the pure viral marketing of the game. But we can think about how is he or how is his parent going to enjoy paying for this game? Is it better as a subscription or a microtrans model? Or can we figure out a way to do both? And whatever that sales model is, now how does our game mechanic support that? All three of them kind of get tied together.
And is your monetization strategy announced for that game?
I don't remember. Like seriously, I don't know. Like new stuff comes out all the time, and it's just better if I don't say.
Yes, you could talk about it, James.
Thank you, not my boss. We have a booth upstairs. Go ask them how to buy it. But I'm sure we'll make it as easy as we can. I keep having this fight at work. I keep, everything is late, and so I'm like, look, it would be better if we have to pick a feature to ship a way to take money without a game than the other way around. I mean, seriously, if we ship a game without a way to take money, we have been wasting our time.
Well, I will say I've heard a counter argument to that from people, which is that you have to seduce the user very slowly, and you don't ask for the money until pretty.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you don't have a plan. It just means that they can play for free for a while.
Right, but which means you could launch a game without monetization features at all.
Without a plan?
No, I said without features.
Without a plan. Yeah, well, it's all about how long is it really going to take.
Yeah.
You and I can have this argument, I'm sure.
We're supposed to have it in front of the people. That's what.
Tyler, you ignorant slut. They bought their tickets. They knew what they were getting into. I say,
We will have Q&A here shortly. Okay, and I would just throw in too that looking at those different pillars, when I look, and I've never confirmed this with anybody from Blizzard, but when I look at World of Warcraft, I think that their monetization strategy, they need you to be in for as long as possible. Their subscription, they want you to be in month after month.
They want you to pay for as long as
Yes.
possible. They don't really care if you can play.
Right.
Yeah,
In
in fact,
fact,
they
it's better
prefer
if they
it.
don't.
Yeah.
But if you look at every single game design feature, it's all time-based, down to clicking and attacking, having cooldown, to travel, to every little thing they do is time-based, because I think that's their business model is time.
Well, I mean, I've got to say that that's true as an overarching feature, but they are huge. They're becoming huge into microtransactions too. Like they put that ghost mount up on their screen and they made $1 million in an hour. So, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Available after the show.
no, seriously. So I mean, it's becoming a much bigger portion of their. Sorry. No, it's okay. Oh.
Yeah, the issue for World of Warcraft is you have people that would be paying Blizzard really thousands of dollars a year, if they could, just because of how much they enjoy playing that game, but they're kind of locked into, $15 a month or less, depending on how much your subscription is. When you come up with a system that basically caps, how much your users can show you love, if you want to call it that, that's an iffy system. I mean, I think the systems, of the microtransactions, and really, all of us, I think, learned this lesson at Wizards, where it's like people who want to buy Magic cards, they're happy to buy Magic cards. And someone wants to buy just a couple packs every time a new set comes out, awesome. But then you have the guy that wants to buy 3 boxes every time a new set comes out, and that guy's even more awesome. And it's great that you have a system where if your customers are really into your game, that you can get rewarded for that, financially. And if you have a system that caps how much your users can be really into your game,
That's-
financially it makes it tough.
That's actually just half of the picture. Right? The other half of the picture is that you have a system where players perceive that money buys you power, they may not want to participate at all. So you're losing those guys. This is a little bit out of date, this data, or this knowledge. I'm not going to give you any data because I don't have any. But subscription models work very well in this market, in the U.S., because people want that, I already paid for it, now I have it, I don't have to pay anymore kind of attitude. And they also don't like the money gets you power feeling that a lot of Asian MMOs have. Those are mostly microtrans, and those raise a bunch more money from their hardcore players. But they don't work over here because everyone else says, that guy bought the best car and I cannot compete with him, so I'm not giving them any money at all.
Yeah, I guess I would question the statement that those don't work over here. I think
Well,
they can. I think they can, and they do work over here.
That's fine. I don't play Magic for that reason. I'm that player. I don't want to have to buy the $1,000 deck to win. So you're losing my money from that. I anecdotally can agree with that perception and that player type. And certainly before 3 or 4 years ago, it was true that microtrans games failed for that reason in this market. This market is changing. And you can say, well, it's not true anymore, but it certainly has been the reason that US games have gone strictly subscription because of the feeling like you're robbing one market to pay the other one.
And I'm pretty sure Warcraft wouldn't have 11 million subscribers or 11 million active paying players if it was free to play.
Well,
Are
there-
they paying you 10 times as much? I totally agree with Henry. It seems crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Worth Wolper, Director of Digital Games for Wizards of the Coast. Please stand up and tell us your question.
Oh, hold on, I'm not saying either one is right, I'm saying what the arguments are, right? I don't know enough to say this is what you ought to do. It comes down to your market and your game. If you're making Magic, by all means, pursue the high volume payer, right? Pursue the heavy user, that's where their money is. That's how the game over time is morphed into a game only for those people, because that's where they see that money coming from, that's fine. But if you make a casual game, and if your players are put off by the fact that the winners are the ones who spend the most money, you're gonna lose your audience. Just understand who's actually paying you and make the game that they want.
And there's certainly lots of examples that support Henry, like the fact that Turbine's gone from subscription to free to play with microtransactions, et cetera. I mean, that saved DDO Online.
Well, it does a couple things. It also just really lowers the barrier to somebody sampling your product, which is huge too. It's like you could have the greatest game in the world, but if someone doesn't want to pay the $50 for the box and doesn't want to have to commit to 3 months or whatever, at $15 a month initially, that's a really high barrier. You have to like have really convince, and actually you have to have one of their friends convince them that this is awesome.
And Puzzle Pirates is a microtrans casual game that has a very few people who pay $20,000 a month to play it, and that's terrific. You know? All right, that's a lot of money to play that game. Now, I say has, but that's dated, it's also old, but I can think of a microtrans game that's very successful and very casual, and it's called poker. There's no subscription to that game. All you do is buy chips and play until your money runs out. And you think that if you're really, really good at that game, you can keep playing for free, and that's what makes people continue to buy chips.
But when I come to your game every Thursday, you charge me $20 to get in the door.
I'm talking about the online version.
Oh.
Games, what they call it?
Yeah. So, and one other example that came to mind was when we were working on D&D, sort of pre-third edition, and there was a question of whether or not there was money being left on the table, because D&D limited the amount of money you could put in because there were only so many books, and the books had only so much relevance. So the decision...
You could put a coin slot in that book, and then every time you open it, you have to put a quarter in. And that quarter goes in a little bag, and then goes straight back.
That's not the model. You put the coin slot at the end in the extra content. If you want to play this character, that's what you're.
My point being, when we decided to do D&D miniatures, part of it was because we thought we could create a price point and a repeat purchase that would monetize the love of D&D with those players. Turned out to be really successful. Okay, so next question. There's a lot of talk amongst game designers about how much you use, especially in the social game category, but also in MMOs, how much you use metrics and data, or telemetry, there's a lot of different ways you call it, of what users are doing to then drive your game design and drive your monetization choices. So if you know that in a microtrans game, everybody's buying the red hat, that gives you a different impression of what that hat should be, or what you should roll out next. There's some purists that think that's not real game design, that's some other thing, and that it violates, what the magic and art of game design is. There are other people that think that's just smart business. Where do you guys fall?
Well, I know for me, it's just looking back, I can remember like months and months of discussion you might have when working on a Magic set. Oh, should this, elephant cost, 3G or should it cost 2GG? And really, there could be weeks of arguments about that and reasons why, or maybe like it should be 2G or something really cheap or expensive. And I'd argue this point, and maybe Worth would argue that point, and Mark Rose would argue this, and we go back and forth. And eventually, it's just like we kind of had to make a leap of faith about like what the right choice was, and we put it out there and we hoped that was the right choice. But with the systems we have now, we could, have it be 3G for a bunch of people. We could have it be 2GG for other people. We could, then test and measure the engagement or whatever it is we want to measure. Like, is the first-time user experience more likely to be successful? Do these people monetize better? Do they play the game more often? Do they play better? With these two variants, you can test it to a small amount. You can see which variant actually works. So the argument isn't like, I'm smarter than you, no, you're smarter than me. It's like, well, we had to let the audience tell us what the actual correct decision was, and that is the correct decision. So when you can do things and through A/B testing and measure like.
So let's quickly define A/B testing.
Oh, sure, sorry. A/B testing is where you might, if you come up with a new feature, you might have different variants on that feature, and you might only release it to a small portion of your audience, and each portion would see variant 1, variant 2, variant 3, etc. You can then measure those variants versus the control, which doesn't see the feature, see which ones perform better or worse, and then decide this is the one we're going to go with.
So in an environment where we used to have a lot of limited play testing and a hell of a lot of arguing, right, you can actually publish in chunks to different audiences and see what their response is. Now, if you're,
But
so-
you're not really inferring whether the game is better. All you know is if it's making more money.
No,
So
no,
by- by
no,
the
no, no,
definition of
no,
the
no, no,
publisher,
no, 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 that is
better
not.
is more money. But
I
from the
mean-
player's perspective, it might be worse.
At the end of the road, yeah, that's what you're looking for. But like for like a first-time user experience, say you have a tutorial where you have a tutorial that looks this way, and you have a tutorial like, I don't know, should you get to level 8 during the tutorial session, or should you get to level 5 during the tutorial section? And we could argue about this for a long time. Or we could just like make 2 tutorial sessions and test the different variations and see which one holds on to users better. And I would argue that the one that holds on to users better is the better tutorial session. I mean, it just is, right? And that's sort of, it's not like just which one monetizes better, it's a lot of other things you're looking at.
I mean, from a business point of view, yeah, it definitely helps your business, but it also can help your design and make your design better. Because you're not just getting information on which one monetizes better, you're getting information on which one they like better.
so, but if,
And also, it can make you even like a better designer. That there's times where I love it when I'm surprised when my testing shows me something that was unintuitive for me. Of like, oh, this feed, you know, for an example, on Mafia Wars, we had there's a game system where, you know, as you're doing jobs, you can find like a secret stash of items, and you can get one for yourself, and you can share one with your friends, and you post a feed sharing these items. You know, pretty typical, you know, Facebook stuff. And I remember when this thing first went out, we had like, it was just like a mystery box was the feed image. And I said, well, you know, better users really love to know that like, instead of just this mystery box, why don't we show like what the actual thing is in the image there, and with the stats on it, you know, like 55 attack and 24 defense, whatever, and then people will be really informed, will be more likely to click on it, will be awesome. And so, you know, we did a bunch of work to sort of have the artists like have a system to do this, tested it, and it's like, no, people actually like clicking on the mystery box more than the actual, showing the actual stats there. It's like, that.
It also turns out that they like gambling more than working.
This is true, and maybe for you it might have been, you know, intuitive that mystery box was better, but for me that I found that very interesting.
It would have been, and that is because I'm strictly a better game designer.
But I found that interesting to have a system where you can let your audience, you know, help you become a better designer.
right, so I guess, and I think that we all will agree that data-driven, after the show, we'll take, we're going to kiss and make up backstage. So data helps, and data is subject to interpretation, and data can be used for good or data can be used for evil. Do you feel like if the data is used to create a more monetization opportunity, do you as a designer have an obligation to follow that path, even if you think it makes the game worse? What if you think
Obligation to who?
to the company?
Well, of course, to the company, you do have that obligation, so you.
The obligation to, if you have to go a direction, which is better monetization but worse for the game, in your opinion as a game designer, and B, it makes for a better game but worse monetization, are you obligated to go in the A direction?
To your employer, yes. So how do you value that?
No, I think that means you need to do your homework a little more. There's times, if you think that something is a better design, you should be able to measure, like, this is going to keep people playing for longer. Like, a lot of times you do come up with a system, you have to be careful with data. Like, it can sort of send you down a path where the end of that path is a lot shorter than this other path that will lead you to something much deeper if you eventually get there. And in other words, you can imagine something that, like, would be like super duper advantage for, you know, $5 and you win the game. A ton of people would buy that, and, you know, the bosses might say, well, this is a great system, you should definitely do this. But the problem is that after, once everybody's done that, they've won the game, then they're gone. Right, and so the long-term effect of that is going to be not healthy for your game. So you have to be careful with metrics that you sort of measure these things over a long enough period of time to make sure that this decision you're making is actually for the long-term benefit of the game. And I would be very hesitant if my sort of gut was telling me this is dangerous. I'd want to measure that sort of system that you're talking about for a much longer period of time than just like, well, 2 days, looks good. All right, push it out to everyone and go.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about we're sort of talking about the platform, but we're really, for the most part, talking about Facebook because it's the most relevant social platform currently. Certainly, Henry's games are on Facebook, although Zynga does have a Zynga.com and Farmville is on MSN.com. And I know Paul, I know that your company may or may not be dabbling in, who knows. So Facebook. You know, something like 400 million users and something like 200 million of the 500 million users, and something like 200 million of those play games actively. the metric for success, one of the metrics that games use is MAUs, which is monthly active users, or DAUs, daily active users. So Facebook made some changes. They make changes constantly to their privacy settings, to what you can and can't do in terms of pushing posts to people's walls and stuff. In April, they did sort of a big restructuring of what you could do. And the charts that I've seen, the information I've seen, is that all of the big games saw a pretty significant drop in their MAUs after those changes, as much as a 30% drop in the case of some big titles. So as a game designer, what does the platform mean, and how do you deal with the fact that you're at the whim of a platform that's more capricious than, say, making something on Xbox, where the system specs certainly aren't going to change over time? How do you deal with that? What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a platform like Facebook?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, it's weird. Yeah, I just saw an email, a friend of mine, I'm off yours, posted this as a 2-year-old email where he said, for fun, we're going to try putting Mafia Wars on Facebook just to see how it goes. Because we were running on MySpace at the time. I don't know if people remember, 2 years ago, MySpace was the big sort of like gaming social network, and Facebook really didn't have many games at all. And I don't think there's a rule that says that Facebook has to be the gaming social network 2 years from now. It could be that Google gets their act together and makes something. It could be that someone else makes something. It could be even that MySpace gets their act together and then comes back. Maybe, who knows?
James, you like gambling.
Facebook.
Sure, that's probably a good bet, and we're certainly gonna be there when we just signed a 5-year deal with Facebook. But it's like you have to use the rules that they give you to the best of your advantage and understand like what they're allowing you to do.
Sorry.
Yeah, it does hurt when they decide to. Well, now we're gonna only show bookmarks for 2 games instead of 10 games, and all of a sudden you just see way less people coming in through bookmarks. So they say, "Oh, we're going to take the request, we're going to take the request channel and take it from this like a very prominent position and move it into sort of much more hidden position." Or, all the feeds, we're going to aggregate everyone's feeds together to like one instead of like showing you all the feeds that people are publishing, and all those things hurt. But even with that, it's still like I think the good games will continue to do well even in that environment. So what I think, it does also make holding on to the people that you have more important, which is good news, because that means that it's like you have to have more fun gameplay and better engagement and make people, want to come back to your game and play, more so than just, we're just going to churn through people and get them to push virals and not really just burn through installs. So it makes like holding on to people even more precious.
Plus, you've got companies like Zynga who are working with Facebook to keep the platform going.
Something like 250 new games a day on Facebook is the number I heard.
I'm not sure.
I mean, it's a hugely noisy channel as well, which means I think, as you're saying, keeping the players involved in this sea of bad games is probably good.
Yeah, well, I know that Facebook doesn't Facebook doesn't treat Zynga as like, they don't love us. They want to see their platform grow. And I think there's some realization now that games are a really important part of the platform, and they're starting to show a little bit more love towards app companies. But I think from their point of view, they'd rather see more companies be successful. So that I think they're going to be making systems, so that more companies can be successful.
You guys want to say anything about the platform? About Facebook?
Facebook's also, for companies other than Zynga, doing a lot for CrowdStar, which has an exclusive deal to only use Facebook credits. And as soon as you do that, Facebook's a lot more invested. And a lot of companies are following that too. They give you premier advertising on the games page. They give you all kinds of stuff if you're doing that. So.
But they're also going to take 30%, right?
But they're also going to take 30%.
It's a pretty big chunk.
It is, but I mean, you get 500 million people. Right? That's a pretty nice distribution.
Good segue to my next question. So 500 million people, how come we don't see more successful hardcore strategy games, gamers games, stuff that's deeply strategic, stuff that takes longer to play, stuff that may even be more action-oriented?
Well, that's kind of like asking why you're not selling Magic cards at NASCAR. Then it's really, it's about the audience. It's about the audience on Facebook. 500 million people, yes, but what percentage of them are us?
Who's on Facebook?
That's true. We're all there.
Anecdotal evidence in
the
your
s-
face.
We're all there swimming in the sea of the other 490 million people on Facebook. So, and you know, when you're in that audience, you're targeting your audience. You're making it like
It's the platform, it's not the players. The platform's terrible. We all have consoles and we're all on Facebook, and if we want to play that game, we go to the place that's best to play it on.
Right. I would agree with that, but he was asking about why aren't there more successful games on Facebook, and it's the platform, but it's also the audience. There are very decent hardcore games on Facebook. Warstorm, Nanostar Siege, those are good games. I enjoy playing those games, but they aren't. But they just aren't going to get the broad marketing that they need. So.
I mean, like you said, there are a few decent hardcore games on Facebook. I think there seems to be the business sort of case made for them. I think it's true that the hardcore audience will monetize much better than the casual audience. I think that's, you know, there's no doubt about that in my mind. But just the fact that there's such a smaller number of them out there than the broad audience means that it's like you have to sort of, you know, aim carefully. I think that I would personally love to see an independent studio make like a really hardcore game and have it become really successful on Facebook, because that would make my job much easier to convince, you know, the bosses, you know, Zynga to say, hey, we could do a hardcore game too. You know, people would really love it, and they'd buy the reasoning for it.
But, well, I mean, I would argue that that's already happening. Like Warstorm, for example, challenged that because of it, basically. The hardcore games don't have as broad a funnel at the top. We're much more narrow, but we're willing to spend $4 boxes of Magic cards. We're willing to actually go deeper and spend deeper for a game that we enjoy. And so those, I think we're going to see more of those games, and they monetize really well, honestly.
So does anybody have any thoughts about non-Facebook social platforms like Apple's newly released Game Center? It's coming out next week, where you can go play iPhone games with social features and that kind of thing. Do you see mobile, handheld, console, any of those things taking a bite out of the social network picture from Facebook?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the future may very well lie in mobile. And we're, you know, taking steps towards that. It's just still a little bit at its infancy and still a little bit hard to use.
Do you think it's just the interface?
I mean, that's part of it, but it's you know, having the system set up there to easily like publish a feed to your friends, or the equivalent of that to your, you know, to your iPhone and such. I mean, yeah, obviously there are some games where you can publish a feed to your friends through Facebook on your iPhone, but I mean like actually just publishing to your friends right to the phone without having to, you know, use Facebook as another app.
And Paul, you said.
Oh yeah, mobile games are huge. I mean, you would be surprised at how big mobile games are. I mean, Real Networks has a huge mobile infrastructure as well, and it does very well. I mean, it's not just iPhones. I mean, iPhones are the shiny, blingy things, but the number of non-smartphones that exist that play games is huge. I mean, worldwide, it's just crazy. So.
Okay. So we're going to open up the field for questions here in just a couple of seconds, if anybody has any. And there's a mic back there in the middle. But the last question for these guys is, what do you think the future looks like in terms of MMOs and social and casual? Do you see one of those categories going away, one getting bigger, convergence, if you will, or not, or will they be separate? What does it look like 5 years from now for those categories of games?
I don't see convergence, but I see, like, social games are so new and the social features are so cool that people are definitely going to be cherry picking them and putting them in their games, right? And anytime a new set of features comes up, people are going to borrow them, but I don't think that means merging them. It's just going to be, here's what's appropriate for my game. I'm making an MMO, and I think social features are cool, and we put them in. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the games that exist now are going to become better games. I think they're going to have to. I think you've even seen that evolution somewhat on Facebook over the 2 years that it's been there, the quality of the games initially versus the quality that they are now. I mean, at least I know the game that I worked on, Mafia Wars, when it first came out, basically just looked like a spreadsheet, sort of. And we slowly, like, you know, page by page, just on the system, tried to make things much more sort of graphically rich, much more actually socially rich, and actually have some sort of gameplay choices in there for people to do. And I think that as we get rewarded for that, there'll be a higher engagement of players that will continue down that path.
Captain?
I think smart publishers and designers will keep ignoring the categories we keep thrusting on this market and making better games.
Can you explain the first part of your statement?
Oh, smart just means you know a lot of stuff.
Okay. And on that note, we'll throw it to the audience. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is on. Oh, it is on. Okay. I play all of the games that you've listed today in one form or another. I especially I'm disappointed that Zynga and the like weren't here last year to talk. I guess it was just sort of, or at least I didn't know that you were here. We have an argument, my boyfriend and I, about what makes a game, and he believes that a game is something that you can lose, and he doesn't qualify Farmville as a game because you can't really lose. So I wanted to hear what you guys had to say.
Has he ever had
wrong.
the entire crop wither on him?
That's my argument. That's my argument. So
He's just wrong.
my argument that you can't lose in an MMO either. I mean, you're still leveling up. You might lose a scenario.
Sure, you can't lose in an RPG either. And a game is just something that you play. And there's plenty of things that you can lose that aren't games. It's just, it's a silly way to break it down.
Okay, thank you.
Obviously, I'm going to agree with you. I mean, it does, Farmville does take a lot of flack from hardcore people. They're like, oh, it's not a game. It's like, okay, if that's how you want to define what's a game or not, that's fine. Just, leave me and the other, 50 million people that want to play it every day alone, and then we'll have fun.
There's a formal definition of games that sort of uses the idea of valorization of outcome, meaning that you just care about the outcome, not that you lose outright. What?
Huh?
Never mind, I should have shut up. These guys know what you and he loses.
And he owes you a coffee.
Hi, my name's Matt. I've been playing MMOs for 10 years now, lead top end rating guilds. So I'm definitely in James's camp on everything you guys are talking about. But the question I
That's
have,
not his game.
I'm talking about
I
the
was
model
right,
that
though,
you
you guys
guys.
used to that. Saves everybody a lot of time.
Feel for everyone model.
Yeah, the model that he's talking about, right. And I want to understand how you balance the need to monetize, as you're talking about, versus the need to retain credibility for your company and your game. Because we're a savvy audience, we're not idiots, and we know when we're being fleeced. And we go to these Farmvilles or these, nickel and dime sort of things, and we get fed up with them. And we want content, we want meat in the games that we're playing. Even the casual gamers.
But aren't you playing Farmville for free?
I don't play Farmville. I think
Right,
it's
but-
a retarded waste of time.
So they've already got all the money out of you that they want. They should alienate you, and you should stop sucking down their server time.
I mean, a little bit of it is different strokes for different folks. I mean, I think we accept that there's sort of I don't want to say MMO purist, if you want to accept that label. It's like, all right, well, Mafia Wars may not be for you because we do allow people to, if they want to spend however much, they can boost their attack and defense, and when they attack people, they'll be successful. I guess we just have to, or I just have to accept that, I know it's not going to be for everyone. And that's okay. There's a pure MMO that'll be awesome for you, and you can do that. And hopefully you'll still play Mafia Wars. You'll have fun just spending 5 minutes saying, oh, I want to see what the next city looks like, or I'm gonna I'll ask for help. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll help them out. I guess it's I don't have a feeling that it's bad to not necessarily be for everyone.
But it's not a for everyone question. It's a longevity of the game and the company, and for people to say that company knows how to make a game, and when something comes out, I'm going to look at it. Versus, if the next Farmville comes out, I don't think people are going to jump on it because they've seen that, they've seen the short-term value of the game.
They do, right? It's called Frontierville, and they jump all over.
Yeah, the 50 million people who would disagree with you about jumping on Farmville. I mean, they really are. Frontierville, City of Wonders.
To your credit, I mean, it's Frontierville when it came out. I assume you haven't seen it. I'm not sure. Maybe people know have seen it. It's kind of like Farmville, but with more actual gameplay. And there's quests that you have to finish, and you feel rewarded for it. I mean, it's not World of Warcraft by any stretch, but it is at least one step closer to being.
So I think your question was, how do you monetize and not insult the player base? And the idea is target players who are not insulted when you monetize. I think it's like,
That's a very
Well, that's an answer, and the other one is just is stick to your sub-only model for as long as you can. Blizzard finally blinked and started selling stuff because there was already a microtrans model, they just weren't getting a piece of it.
okay, next question. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about the potential negative impact of social gaming on the AAA video game industry. And just by sheer numbers, Zynga eclipses a conventional AAA studio. And recent events have definitely reiterated this, like Brian Reynolds, veteran of Firaxis and Microprose and Big Huge Games founder, jumped ship on his own company to come to Zynga. So I just want to know your thoughts about the impact on AAA video games.
I mean, I think it's great for casual games. We have people like Brian at Zynga helping to make us make more real games. You know, again, his debut was Frontierville. I don't know if you had a chance to play that or not, but it's like, it's definitely a much bigger step towards a real game than Farmville is. But I mean, there will still always be a place for AAA games. It's like, I don't expect that, like, the people in this room necessarily love playing Farmville. I mean, I think it's great that they do. I like playing AAA games. I used to play a ton of World of Warcraft. I still like sort of the hardcore games when they come out and I play them. At the same time, it's like, I don't mind asking my friends for help in my Mafia. And it's like, I see the casual games as more of like a 5-minute, 10-minute break in your life to play it, whereas like the hardcore AAA games are something that you're going to be spending hours of time on. And I think they can coexist.
Do you see them becoming increasingly irrelevant though?
AAA? Yeah. Not at all. As long as they continue to make money, people will continue to make them, for sure.
I mean, you certainly, like, if you go to the NVIDIA booth now, you're not going to see Farmville up on their screen, right? we want those kind of games too, and the platform is such, I mean, you know, looking 20 years in the future, maybe a social network will exist where you can play any of those games, where you can play Monday Night Combat or anything like that, and that would be awesome in a certain sense, but there's no danger right now for people like that.
Yeah, I guess I should say that I think that the casual games are reaching out to make the gaming audience a much broader audience. Like Tyler alluded to, like the 40-year-old moms that are playing Farmville.
I mean, that sounds
they
like
would have
an awful lot.
never bought a AAA game. I mean, you can say it's weak, but it's like, I know that it's like my mom's playing Farmville.
No, not weak. Nintendo Wii.
Oh, Nintendo Wii.
The whole
Sure.
appealing to a broader audience. But
Absolutely.
That doesn't make people gamers.
Okay, we're gonna try to get through the line. Thanks for your question. What, is that bad?
No.
It doesn't make people gamers.
Oh.
He's using a different definition of gamer than maybe some of us do. but-
Hey, they're a step
For what he's
closer.
saying, I'm sure he's right.
Young man, next question.
Cool. Hey guys. You touched briefly on just how it's a little hard to monetize off of the casual market, build a demographic. I was wondering now that there's more free-to-play models, especially on Facebook, have you guys started using things like retail psychologists and economists to help boost sales?
Specifically, no, but we're all learning those skills.
So is it kind of important in this realm now to consider those other disciplines that video games maybe didn't do before?
Could you imagine bringing in a merchandising expert?
Yeah, for sure. We do a lot of user research and trying to understand our players and what they want. We did a lot of that in Magic, you know, looking at the psychographics of the players and like what the different players want. And we do the same sort of things with casual games, like what are you looking for, and talking about like the Bartles player types for casual games and what they are.
Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Sure.
Hello. So the category busting game that we heard a lot about in the past was Free Realms. It seemed to combine social, a bunch of casual games. It had TCG. It was an MMO in the browser. It had microtransactions, etc. And yet it didn't. As far as I can tell, it didn't do very much.
Yeah.
What do you guys see was the issue? Why that didn't
Distribution.
combine everything and take off?
I think it's a distribution issue. It's just hard to like get somebody to go to a website to download a client to play your game, especially when the person you're trying to target is like 8 years old or 10 years old. To get them to go to a particular website and download a game to play is pretty rough.
I can tell you from my experience, when I looked at free rounds, I thought it would be as a focus group world. It was like they kludged in every like little archetype they could, every game type, and there was no unifying element to a narrative or something that even I could hang my hat on as a genre. And for me, it was really disjointed. So it was like all the little pieces were there, but I felt like there was no vision except what the marketing people would tell them. You got to have a kart racing thing. We want you to have a cooking thing. You need to have a unicorn. Like you should throw it all in there. That was my impression at first.
No, that's very true. There's so many things you can do at any particular time. You're just constantly like, well, what should I do? It's hard to make that decision at any particular time in that game. There are much better games like, I don't know about much better games. I actually like free roams quite a bit, but like Wizard 101 and Toontown are much better examples of games that do those kinds of things.
All right.
Hi. My question is, do you think that the increased popularity of microtransaction-based games directly correlates with the recent economic recession?
No. No, because we were having exactly the same conversation 2.5 years ago. I don't think that the economy can be helping us in either one of those fronts.
Yeah, and when I was working on at Artifact on Horizons 8 or 9 years ago, we were talking a lot about that because at the time the actual pinnacle of MMOs was not in this country; it was in Korea. The first Lineage game had over 2 million active players, and it was free-to-play microtransaction. So it was something we very strongly looked at, but we realized that America was not ready for that at all. So.
Okay, thanks.
Hello, full disclosure, I work with Paul, and I own him in Ringer Zone.
No, wait, we're even at the moment.
Anyway, so what I wanted to ask the three of you, or the four of you, there hasn't been a new paradigm really in definitely social games. It seems, in my experience, for a while. Zynga's done very well, but they're all very similar. My question is, do you think there's going to be a new paradigm, and could it come from outside of, where do you guys think it might come from? Is it going to be a new board game that's going to get translated, or maybe a AAA title that has a new thing, or is it going to come from social?
Well, you were just saying that the stuff on Facebook is only a couple of years old. How new does this new paradigm have to be? Maybe like last week?
Well, no, what I mean is, RPGs and questing, and so think outside of the Farmvilles and the Mafia wars. Like a new game type. Like I don't want to be a farmer or an RPG.
We should. He's got a very valid point in that when games on Facebook first started, Mafia Wars was huge, and there were a ton of games that copied them basically. That sort of, and still do. Those games come out all the time, and some of them are really good, but they're the same kind of game. But then Farmville actually kind of created a new paradigm. The games like that, the more sort of active decorating and doing and the cycling thing, and did let the cafe world and all of those games. And then the Sims also, the Restaurant City kind of games are another new paradigm. Things like that are happening all the time. I just the other day I was looking, and there's a first-person shooter that's available on Facebook. And the paradigms are constantly coming, and it's still too new for anything to be really solid. Yes, you get tired of seeing the next Mafia Wars clone and the next Farmville clone, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that new things aren't happening all the time.
It's probably hitting us right now, and we'll talk about it 2 years from now.
Yeah, exactly.
And my game comes out next May.
My game comes out at the end of September.
What game would that be?
Oh, that's Lords of Vegas. We waited until Vegas Showdown was totally out of frame.
Lords of Vegas, available with Mayfair Games?
Mayfair Games, that's right. They have a
Fantastic.
demo copy of it right here. Thank you, Tyler.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Scott, and I just want to ask about progression and stuff, because one of the key concepts of MMOs and browser games like Farmville is that the player always has a sense of progression. But as the game designer, you don't want them to progress too fast because you want them to still play your game. And I just want to ask you, where do you think this direction is going? Because there's some interesting ideas out there now. Final Fantasy XIV tells you can't progress after 8 hours of gameplay a week. Aeon ramped up their experience grind, and Lord of Ultima, for example, had this thing where you could have mana and spend, so you couldn't spend your way to winning the game. Where do you see progression going, keeping the player interested?
Those are all neat tricks, but when you say that your game is going to require progress to stay interesting, you're setting yourself up to run out of content. There are plenty of games where the only progress is you're getting better at it. And those are good forever. Those are good as long as they stay fun. Poker is like that, Bejeweled is like that. But a game that tells a story is going to run out of story.
Yeah, that's true. there's like the normal MMO sort of system where you hit a level cap and then you kind of hang out there for a few months and everybody gets better equipment. And then once you're in expansion, you can get 10 more levels, and everyone levels up again, and then you get a level cap, and then there's new content. I think that works pretty well. It's been a challenge for me on Mafia Wars, the fact that there is no level cap, and you can just keep leveling forever. And trying to have an MMO where people actually attack each other and fight each other in a system where you can gain infinite levels, quite tricky. The balancing of that has been interesting, that it becomes not so much like your level sort of like loses its significance in an MMO sense of like, I mean, it's still progression, it's still something, but it doesn't really matter as much for like as you're fighting. So, I mean, that's up to, I mean, if I were to do it all over again, I don't think I'd like a system where you get to level up infinitely. I think I would have something a little bit closer to what the normal MMOs do of like, you level up, but it gets slower and slower, then you get a cap, and once you get a cap, you get better equipment until the expansion is ready. Expansion comes out, everyone can level up again, hooray, and start going, and people will pay money to level up quickly. So.
Okay, last three guys, you can go up, ask the question, sorry, personally, because we're out of time. I'd like y'all to give them a round of applause. Thanks for coming out, everybody.